Mm, hello, hello. Testing, testing, ठिक छ? Mic. Okay, I think मैले record गरिरहेको छु. I think so. This is very difficult. This is very new for me. So forgive me. लाइभमा त कोही नभए पनि होपफुली यो भिडियो रेकर्ड भएपछि युट्युबमा आएपछि कसैले हेरिदिनुहुन्छ होला. um, तर मेनली चाहिँ मलाई मेरो आफ्नो विचारहरू राख्न मन थियो होइन. यो टाउकोमै राखिरहनुभन्दा अथवा लेख्नुभन्दा अ, अ, आउनु थाल्यो अडियो आउनु थाल्यो. ओके, सो मैले यो भर्खर यो भिडियो हेर्दै थिएँ. द प्रिन्ट भन्ने एउटा इन्डियन मिडियाले चाहिँ बाबुराम भट्टराईसँग उ गरेर चाहिँ अनि when the journalist asked म अङ्ग्रेजीमै बोल्न खोज्छु होइन. अङ्ग्रेजीमै बोल्छु है, तर टाइम टाइममा नेपाली बोलौँला. बट when the journalist asked him about economic reforms, Baburam Bhattarai said one, uh, land reforms. Okay, and then two, he said something like planning, right? Again, building a setting a committee, like a national planning commission, something like that, right? And implementing it. And I mean, this guy's a he's a Maoist. Um, I I don't have much faith. Okay, it looks like I have two viewers, so if you are in the chat, do say hi. I think one of them might be me, but the other person might be somebody like an actual human being. So hello. Anyways, this guy's a Maoist, so obviously he's gonna say things like land reforms and planning committees and stuff like that, right? I'm not gonna watch the video. I watched like 20 minutes of it. I was like, okay, that he's an interesting guy. Okay, hello, special Kiswayar, bro. My first viewer. Let's go. I'm talking about economic reforms, my guy. Um, but I'm kind of I've one. So after the reporter asked this question, I kind of thought about, well, what do I believe to be decent or needed economic reforms that sets the path for this country, right? That kind of lays down the foundations. And so this is kind of what I'm going to be talking about. These are just my ideas, but I hopefully I'll like argue them well enough that you feel convinced, or at least we have a discussion. So the first thing I'm going to get rid of this. I don't want to see his face anymore. It's just very hard to be live. But thank you, Pissel, for watching. Hopefully this is useful. Anyways, and right now I just have a paint document. So, all right. So the first thing I think is reduce the size of, even though we're talking about size of or economic reforms, I think a lot of political reforms need to precede this. Right. So reduce the size of government and state. Okay. Nepal's government is, I want to say, like 20 to, the budget is like, government's budget is like a third or around a third of national GDP. And so really a third of the income is just spent on a non-productive entity, which is the state. The state is not productive, right? The government is not productive, right? It's a means of governance, but it doesn't actually produce, right? It spends money, but that's really just revenue that it spends. And so it's not a, and then taxes and revenues are just transfer payments, right? They come from productive assets. And so I think the government is way too big, right? Not just the government, but the state. The administrative state is too big. The budget is it's too large. So it's one third. It's around one third. Okay, I mean, if it's like the recent budget was like 12B, right? Around two. These numbers aren't exact, but it's a very good approximate, right? GDP, I want to say, is less than 40, right? 40B, right? And so like one third, one fourth, right? Of the budget or of the GDP of GDP it just goes towards funding the state, right? And then you have a lot of these like negative repercussions, which seems to happen time and time again. Those things being, well, you know, the budget is so big. First of all, it's not fully spent, and so it's not fully utilized for production, right? The second is you have a lot of corruption in that. So when building a road, you'll have somebody be like, okay, well, we're just gonna mark it up, right? And I think those things still belong. Those are still responsible. I have another viewer. Hello, please say hi if you are a real person. Thank you for watching. Anyways, size of government is way too big. Too many employees, right? Um, too many commissions and all these. Like, I mean, obviously the state, the Pradesh province structure, right? Too many samsad and Pradesh, right? Maybe even too many wadas, right? 730 something wadas, and then they have their own like little structure, right? The state is too big. Um, and so I think the first thing you do is just reduce the size of government and state. What this does is it immediately allocates money from the public to the private sector, right? So from the public to the private, right? And what this means is that, and well, why does this happen, right? Because the private sector pays less in taxes, right? And so theoretically, they invest more, right? And currently, the capital formation is really bad. People, there's not a lot of capital being formed in terms of investment, right? A lot of it is just money comes in and then immediately money flows out in terms of imports, right? Um, if you can lower the tax, if you can lower taxes by 5%, and it doesn't even have to be a one to one, right? It doesn't even have to be. You don't even need this, right? It could just be like a 2%. Lowering taxes, if that leads to a 2% increase in investment, right? That's much better than no percent increase in investment, because really the things that pay dividend in the future and the things that compound are these investments. So the first thing I would say is you have to reform the government, right? And when you lower taxes, right, you can be very specific about where you lower these taxes from where you lower these taxes. Um, and I think I can't conclusively say, I can't say at this point, you know, without understanding the economic reality, the data, and also the political reality. I can't be like, हुन्छ नि धनी मान्छेहरूले बढी ट्याक्स दिनुपर्छ, corporations बढी ट्याक्स दिनुपर्छ, अथवा चाहिँ वर्कर्सहरूले बढी ट्याक्स दिनुपर्छ. I can't say that because I'd have to really be in the weeds of the data. But I think in general you can say taxes, and you can be really specific about the sectors. That's the benefit, right? Benefit benefit is specificity. And so this is really where the politics of a new era has to exist, right? You have to be like, And this is where the political interests align and where the lobbying happens, right? Is, well, if you have a if you have an entity that's voting, right, they demand lower taxes for themselves. And so this is where kind of the politics has to shift to instead of saying, we'll do politics to get rich and to be corrupt. You say we do politics to favor our constituents in certain ways. Um, and so and so that's kind of the thing. That's number one is lower taxes, lower size of government. Right? I think there's this idea that there's this idea in Nepal, right? And it's like it's a very paternal state, and when people have this paternalistic idea that direction has to come from the top from the government, and the government is responsible for development. The government is really only responsible for laying down the foundation, right? A very strong foundation of rocks and concrete pillars and all these the strong foundation, right? Actual development, actual growth happens from the private sector, right? In China, in China, the communist state was not growing. It was only when Deng Xiaoping, right, when Deng had all these economic reforms that led to the growth in the Chinese economy. And so, you would kind of have to understand this, right? The government is responsible for funding roads and all these infrastructure uh, developments, but really true economic growth and true human development index growth comes from the private sector. And so you lower taxes, and you lower the size of government, right? And what this does is actually, number two, this is very important. It frees up all this managerial capital, right? So I call this the managerial capital, right? And how does this do it? How does it do that? You have all these government employees, right? Hundreds of thousands of government employees who have good experience. They have steady paying jobs, right? And these are like mostly office jobs, right? What they've gained in that time is this managerial experience, this kind of like working under a corporate structure, which is actually the bureaucracy, right? The bureaucracy is it's a highly corporate structure, right? There's a clear delineation in terms of responsibilities and roles, right? So you have the boss, you have his workers or her workers, and then this delegation, this pyramid structure. It's a very corporate structure, and so all these people, all the people that are currently in in that are currently working as government employees, they have all this managerial capital, right? Institutional capital that they can bring into the private sector, right? Because if you think about it, I mean, really the unemployment issue is an issue for the youth, right? I'm sure the unemployment's not that high for adults, but it's very low. It's very high for the youth, right? Right, but the youth don't come with this kind of capital, right? This has to be developed over years and years of experience, and so this is a boon for the private sector, right? It frees up a lot of capital, but the way you want to do this, right? Lowering taxes, right? Or sorry, lowering taxes or lowering the size, right? Let's say this is today, right? And then so this say this was the size of government, right? You don't say you don't make like a discrete, right, rapid jump in the size of government, right? This is bad, right? So this right here is very bad. What you would want to do is do a gradual decrease, right? And so this way, right, the private sector, you give the private sector a lot of time, right? Time to adjust, right? You give the private sector a lot of time to adjust to this influx in increase in employees, right? Potential, or there you have an increase in labor supply, and so the demand, if the demand isn't there, you have all these people that are unemployed, right? And so if you kind of set expectations in a certain way and then you start executing on it, I think the private sector has some time to, and then this way you can also just stop the policy if it goes bad, right? Or even increase the rate, or just stop it, or even reverse it, right? But I think there are a lot of benefits that it's absolutely necessary, right? So two, managerial capital, right? Utilizing that. Three, Babura moderate. Hello, I have another viewer. Hello, how's it going? Please say hi if you are a real person in the chat. Thank you for joining me. Um, I think there was a delay, so by the time I say hi, it'll take some time, but I do see you. Okay, number three, Baburam Bhattacharya talked about land reforms, right? He was like, there needs to be land reforms. I don't think I think land reforms in the way that Bhumi Sudhar was done during Mahendra's time is very, you know, that's very socialist. It's very communist, and it's that doesn't protect people's private property. And so I would say no land reforms, right? Even though this is a very important thing, important issue, mudda, no land reform, but uh, policies policies regarding regarding land, right? And so if I just let's say I just zoom in here, right? And let's say this is this bit of land right here. Okay, let's say this bit of land is currently unproductive, right? If this bit of land is currently unproductive, um, then so I'm not sure if you have I'm not sure what the property tax structure is like. I'm not sure how high the property taxes are. Um, but you kind of need to kind of implement a no production tax, prod tax, right? No production tax or a a ba, right? Bazo tax, right? It's like this bazo tax, right? And what this means is if your land is not producing, right, you get taxed, per square meter, right? That's a very small percent, right? So that if you have like ikropan, you're only paying like maybe like $1,000, 1,000 rupees or something, right? It's a very small amount. But it's a nuisance that you have to kind of pay for. Um, and what this does is it de-incentivizes holding Basel land, right? Either you are incentivized to lease, right, or you are incentivized to sell, right? And if you run the simulation enough, right, where you have this tax, right, if you increase the no production tax, right, this process happens faster. But I think I do always argue for a gradual, right. And so what this does is, so this is like non-productive, right, land. I mean, this my handwriting is really bad. Next time I'll try to connect my iPad so that I can type better, right? So let's say we're at some natural level right here, current level, right? As the tax occurs, right, this you have like a gradual decrease, right, until it slowly just it's like a logistics function that kind of just asymptotically smooths out, right? If this tax is very high, right, this process happens fast, right? Otherwise, this happens like it's happening in a natural way where people still want to produce, right? But we have to be clear that this is just a Bazo tax, right? This is not a property tax. You are not taxed uh, um, just for owning the property, right? You're taxed for if it's not producing, right? If it's producing, you're entitled to pay your taxes. You're obligated to pay your taxes on any production that you make, right? But this is a specific policy that penalizes leaving it fallow, right? And what this does is really increases the supply of land, right? And I say this because the only way for Nepal's GDP, right, in the short term for GDP to grow, right? If GDP grow, then you need if GDP to grow, you need uh, ag growth, right? This is what sets the foundation, right? I don't think in a developed in the Nepal, right, in 20, 30 years, Agriculture is going to be a small percent of GDP because you have all these things that grow much faster, right? But in the short term, right? So I'm going to make agriculture green, right? Agriculture like 20-30%, right? You want this to grow fast, right? You want this to grow fast early, right? Manufacturing, right, is a very small portion, right? It's like very rarely there, right? There will come a point where this starts to grow, and this intersects agriculture, but this can grow in t equals like 5, right? You can have this kind of growth happening in t equals 5, whereas this growth you have to wait for t equals 15 maybe, right? And then I think you'll have some like I mean service sector might be higher, right? Uh you have kind of like you have something like this, right? The services keep growing, right? And I think this kind of evens out, but then the services kind of keep growing, right? But immediate the agriculture kind of has to the agricultural sector has to kind of set the foundation for it, and it also has the ability to employ the lowest skilled people. Hello, I have another viewer. Welcome to my thing, my live. I'm talking about economic reforms. I appreciate you being here. धन्यवाद. ये दिन बाकोमा. Um, I'm talking about just basic economic reforms that are pertinent for Nepal's economy, right? And so if you want GDP to grow, you need agriculture to grow, and this also employs a lot of the lowest skilled people, right? Or it doesn't necessarily only employ them, right? But this provides a lot of employment for low skilled people, and so I mean this is this and that's a lot, and if we look at it as like a pyramid, right? Where this is the lowest skilled, right? And the skill, right, or skill increases as you go up, right? And then this axis is like magnitude or mag or number of people, right? The most number of people that you have are the largest number of people you have that are actually highly unskilled, right? And so you want to incorporate the most number of people and to have them be totally employed, right? So that the income generated from this, right? The private income generated from this, right? If invested, even like just 5% is invested, right? This compounds at a much better rate than if you just focused on this tier, right? If you just focus on this tier, right? Even though this is a higher income, right? It's less because you have fewer people, right? And so that's kind of, I'm not I can't say that I can't assert that for certainty, but that's kind of the framework I think we have to look at it. That's kind of the framework from which we have to look at this. Okay, and so that's the third thing, right? Land, no, not land reforms, but policies regarding land, right? And then the fourth one is ag subsidies and institutions. Ag subsidies that are designed to go down as time passes, right? Once you and so if this is ag if let's say this is ag GDP right here, right, on the side, uh, if ag grows, right, at some point you want to kind of lower the subsidies, right? The subsidies should really only exist to facilitate this growth. It should not the subsidies should not exist in this framework, right? Because then, right, this level, right, gets bumped up by whatever the level of subsidies is, right? But this is not the efficient equilibrium. The efficient equilibrium is somewhere here, right? And so you're kind of funding this inefficiency. But with the short-term subsidies, it does lead to it does lead to a faster increase, right? And I say subsidies and institutions, right? You have to kind of fund the formation of institutions in the agricultural sector, right? And whether this is like self-regulating bodies or government regulation, right, in a lot of things, or markets, right? Markets not just for the physical good, but derivatives and swaps and futures based on agriculture, right? And I think this is, I mean, what I mean by subsidy is this is just a transfer payment, right? This is just a transfer payment from the government to, right, ag sector, right? And this kind of has to, you have to kind of understand the reality and then kind of allocate it accordingly, right? So ag subsidies and institutions, right? That's the fourth one. And then fifth one is or I want to say economic zones, right? So EZ or just zoning in general. And I have a proposal for this, right? For Kathmandu specifically, right? Like, so you have all these people, and this is actually something Baburam Bhattarai himself said, so credit to him. Um, you have, right, so if this is Nepal, right, you have all this in migration into Nepal, into Kathmandu, right? All these people come into Kathmandu, right? But Kathmandu doesn't have jobs to provide these people, and so these people leave, right? And so if you develop, so now this is Kathmandu, right? If you and so I mean this is Bagmati, right? Multiple ways to flows in. Down here, if you zone for like an industrial zone, and so I have I'm going to argue for this, right? So I think we can see this map fairly clearly. My laptop is overheating. Uh, the graphics card can't handle this, but it's fine. If we look at this, right, there is a lot of space kind of kind of downstream, right? Kind of down here, downstream, right? I want to say um, the exit of this valley or the mouth, if you look at it, right? There's a lot of, I mean, there's land down here, right? That I think needs to be zoned for industrial use. Okay. Um, and why down here specifically, right? Even though Bhaktapur has good industry, heavy industry in terms of like brick making and stuff. Well, you pick down here because um, any pollution in the water doesn't, pollute the actual city, right? And I think, but if you do this, the wastewater management plant has to be somewhere down here, right, where that zone exits, right? But it's far enough segregated away, right? But the other thing is this the fast track, the Kathmandu Tore fast track follows follows this. I mean, enters through here, right, from this exact point, and so that having that, right, I think there are a lot more specific policies that we could discuss, right? But immediately, if you do this, right, you kind of block this, right, and then maybe you even incentivize some more urbanization. And I would say urbanization equals good. Okay, good. Okay, so that's good. And so I think this is the first of this of these streams. Hopefully I'll do more. Hopefully I find the inspiration to do more. But for now I think these aren't the most immediate. I think this is very immediate, right? And this is just a corollary of this, right? This is fairly immediate, right? Ag subsidies. This, I mean, needs to be done. Right? I think this is necessary if you want to build the right foundation. Next time I'll try to do another like 30 minute. It looks like I've been live for like 30 minutes. Next time I'll try to do a 30-minute live stream talking about five more kind of policies, right? I don't think the socialist model of having a planning commission and let the private sector do this, right? The private sector is completely possible able to do this. You just have these sensible policies that first reduce government intervention and then kind of incentivize certain sectors and certain businesses, right? But that's really a political thing. So I can't conclusively say it's incumbent that we do exactly these things. Also, I don't have the data with me, so but that's been today. That's been my thing for economic reforms and economic policy making. Hopefully, I'll come back with another one. But thank you for watching, and I hope you gain something from this. And if you did, or if you want to have a debate, say something in the comment section.